Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bridget Maloney, and I am the director of the University of Waterloo's Corporate Engagement Office called GEDI. It stands for a Gateway for Enterprises to Discover Innovation. First, I want to make a land acknowledgement. So we at the University of Waterloo want to acknowledge we live and work on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. The University of Waterloo is situated on the Haldimand Tract, the land promised to the Six Nations that includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand River. Our active work toward reconciliation takes place across our campuses through research, learning, and teaching, as well as community building. And it is centralized within our Office of Indigenous Relations. So I'm very pleased you could join us today for this month's 30 Minutes with the GEDI Exchange. It's a monthly webinar that we do as part of the GEDI Exchange's mission to support the success of startups and scale-ups that are affiliated with the university, regardless of where they're located in the world. And so we actively try to promote collaboration among the startup and scale-up members. These are both, as I say, large and small corporations, as well as their connection with the university for talent, for conducting research together, and so on. So for today, we'll be focusing on a really interesting theme: empowering the students and educators of today to create the relevant workforce of tomorrow. And I know everyone, companies, students, every organization is concerned with this topic. So I'd like to welcome Esteban Ventimiglia from 1Mentor and Rob Darling from Profound Impact. They're our guests today, and they're going to introduce themselves. And I also really want to thank Rob for stepping in for his colleague, Cheryl, who unfortunately was unable to be with us today. So thanks, Rob. So the panelist portion, just to let the audience know, the panelist portion, as you see here, will be 30 minutes, so half hour in length, and then we'll have an optional 10-minute Q&A. Hopefully you can stay with us for that. And throughout the webinar at any time, send your questions in using the Zoom Q&A. It's the Q&A at the bottom center of your Zoom window. So I just want to let you know the event is being recorded. We'll upload the video to GEDI's YouTube channel shortly after this webinar. So now I'd like to turn it over to our guests to introduce themselves and their companies. And perhaps we could start with Rob and Profound Impact, and then Esteban with your company, 1Mentor.
Thank you, Bridget, and thank you for having Profound Impact here today and myself. So I am Rob Darling. I'm the strategic advisor for Profound Impact. Profound Impact works with educational institutions and community organizations and research institutions to help them measure and leverage data so that they can inform their programming and understand future strategy.
Thanks, Rob.
Great. Well, again, thank you so much, Bridget and the entire GEDI team for having me today. Extremely excited to be here. My name is Esteban Ventimiglia. I am the CEO and one of the co-founders of 1Mentor. A bit about the company. Well, the problem that we're addressing is that we all know how the world has been disrupted by technology, especially over the past couple of decades. And as a result, preparing students with the right skills, the right tools that are required by the labor market is harder than ever. So we partner with colleges and universities to help them and their students understand how the labor market is evolving and what employers are expecting from new graduates, right? So back to you, Bridget. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Esteban. Yeah, and that's a perfect segue actually into the first question I have, which is, could you, each of you, take us briefly through what your company does? So the words impact and mentor are in your company titles. So is the aim to help individual students or job seekers or educational institutions or employers? So maybe Rob, you could address that first.
Sure. So our main thing, how we help impact, is we help those educational institutions leverage data. And that might be data that we join with existing co-op data and look at a 10-year view of graduates and what their career progression has, how it's progressed. And then we can map it back to the co-op students and where they did their co-op. That's just one example. But we're trying to help them have a greater impact in their program. So we know that we're good at leveraging data and understanding data, that they're really good at running programs. So how can we leverage that data that they have so they can measure their impact, so that they can then tell their story, and so that they can then inform their strategy for future programming to meet the needs of the next graduates.
Excellent. Thanks, Rob. Esteban.
Well, I guess regarding your first part of the question, like why the mentor part in our name, I guess that by definition, a mentor is, an experienced and trusted advisor. And we want to be that one place where students can go to get guidance on what skills they need to learn based on their career goals. So how do we do this? Just to get like a better understanding, I know Rob just touched upon some of like the data that they use. Basically, our platform learns from data collected first from job postings, which we now have over 100 million that we're analyzing. There specifically, we're looking into the roles, the job responsibilities, the requirements, and the qualifications, which will allow us to understand the labor market needs there. And then on the other hand, the data collected from college and university curricula and student resumes will allow us to analyze the skill set that students have. And with this, we basically put this information on a platform that's accessible by both college and university staff and faculty and students. And we provide personalized recommendations on how to address this skills mismatch.
Okay, so thank you. So then going just a little bit deeper, maybe into similar question, like, who are your typical clients and what would a typical engagement with them look like? So for example, both of your offerings make a lot of use of data and AI and visualization. But how does that maybe contrast with what's available in LinkedIn or maybe some of the more advanced job boards? So Esteban, maybe you can continue.
Yeah, for sure. So first, like our partners are higher education institutions, and our users, it's their faculty, their staff, and their students. Addressing the differentiator part of the question is that we're giving students personalized, actionable information about the skills and knowledge that they need for them to meet their dream careers. And I don't think that's available in like a normal, job portal, as you mentioned. And also arming institutions with the information necessary to equip the students to match the industry standards and requirements. So the typical engagement would be for us to partner with a college or university. We give them the option for them to share their data with us. So that could be co-op data, career services data. And the purpose behind that is to give them institution-specific insights. We feed this data into our models. And through our platform, we can provide this personalized recommendations to their faculty, staff, and students into how they can better prepare for the future of work.
Okay, very interesting. Rob, would you mind commenting on that question? And I can repeat it. It was a long question if you need.
No, I think that's okay. So I think there's some similarities between 1Mentor and Profound Impact in that light. So we do work with educational institutions, research institutions, and community organizations. Every one of those organizations has different existing data, or sometimes no existing data. They just know that people took their program and they want to know about where they are now 10 years later. But our engagement is much the same. So we look at that, we work with them, we figure out if they have some internal data that we can match up with the public data, and then bring back insights. When we think about bringing back insights, we're really bringing it to 3 audiences internally. Again, depending on whether it's educational, research, or community organization. But if we just look at education, we're bringing that back to the people who run the program. So if it's a co-op program, or if it's a program of study, if it's computer science, that kind of program, the marketing people, because they want to market what's happening with their alumni, and then the leadership teams, so that they can understand strategically where they need to take the educational institute ongoing.
Okay, interesting. So it sounds like both with Profound Impact and 1Mentor, you first approached the organization in terms of data. I'm just curious. Sounds like you partner and use, analyze the data if made available, but otherwise, I know maybe in 1Mentor's case, you might be able to use external sources of data or commercial data or public data. Is that true, Rob, with Profound Impact as well? Maybe you could both just comment and just clarify that.
Sure. So we use a combination of data. So internal data when we have access to it, public data, as well as commercially available data. And it's from a variety of sources, and it really depends on what the organization is looking for. But it can be, up to 10 different sources for that,
Right.
for that
All right.
data. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, thanks. Esteban, yeah.
Yeah, in our case, I think you hit the nail on the head there. So we use a combination of private data. The biggest problem that we've had sometimes is that maybe, as Rob mentioned, some institutions don't have that much data that we can work with. There's other ones like the University of Waterloo that has a huge, co-op data set, and it's beautiful to work with. But then on other cases, we basically need to complement this data with maybe publicly available data, or even data sets that we've been building internally as a team, and it's like proprietary data that we're using currently. So it's a combination of all of those.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to change the direction a little bit of the questions now, and it's sort of a multi-part question, really. Looking sort of to the future and the journey of the students or of the employees, I should say. So first of all, what are the long-term impacts that you see for educational institutions, employers, job seekers, and students who leverage the insights provided by your platform? So Esteban, maybe over to you first.
Perfect. So start with post-secondary institutions. I think that'll be the key one. So our vision is really getting to a place where post-secondary education and career services at colleges and universities are in sync with industry. That's our long-term goal. Regarding students, which would be in our case, the job seekers, right? The long-term goal is for them to really feel prepared for the careers and that they have acquired, the skills and the knowledge that are required for them to succeed after graduation. And then finally, I guess from the employer side of things, which we haven't gotten too much into that, but of course, the idea is that they're going to be getting talent with the skills that they need. That could have huge impacts. And now that I know about Profound Impact, maybe we can even work together to measure that impact and see how it's going in a few years from now. Like honestly, really admiring the work down there at Profound Impact. Rob.
Yeah, thank you, Esteban. I think we have much the same view of that. I think the world is shifting, and the future of work, what we put under the umbrella of future of work, are these skills that people need to have to be more agile in their workplace and change. And we're seeing this in the data. We're seeing, that people are switching their jobs every 3 years, like switching companies, right? They're switching roles every 1.5 to 2 years. So there's a lot of changes, and for universities to keep up with those changes, we need a good data loop back to understand what are the changes, what's happening, how can we inform the program of study. And there's one other thing that I just want to mention, and that is something that's been big in the tech sector, and that is diversity. So what are the differences between females and males in the workforce, and how can we prepare females better for the workforce based on what we're seeing in the data, or other diversity issues? So we're starting to see those things emerge as well. That is giving us better insight, and will hopefully make an impact on the programming as well. Thanks,
Rob. And so pleased to hear the comment that Esteban, that there might be opportunity for both of your companies to partner in some way. I mean, that's exactly what that's wonderful. It's exactly what we hope might happen by introducing and bringing together companies working in similar spaces. So following on, Rob, from what you just said, actually, it's interesting. So what do you both think is the main barrier between employers and students in communicating the skills that are needed or skills in demand? And how do you both help to bridge that gap?
Yep, so I can take that one first. So I think there's definitely a skill articulation problem, and it comes from both sides: the students articulating skills and also employers articulating in their job postings, like what is it really that they need, right? So from the student side of things, they participate in so many activities when they're undergraduate students, and they build high demanded skills like communication, teamwork, problem solving, like all these different transferable skills. That they just don't know how to talk about on the resumes. They don't know how to bring them up in an interview, even at networking events. And it is crucial for them to learn how to articulate these specific skills that they have acquired through the various experiences. But again, we believe that one of the biggest factors causing this is access to information. Like, how I was advising students for like 4 years on how they should be getting jobs, like how they can apply, how they can prepare for interviews and stuff. But how can you expect a student to articulate a specific skill if they don't even know that it is demanded? They don't know that employers are looking for that. Like, why would they be including that there? So that's why we want to equip students with insights into what's demanded from industry, so that they can build the skills that they're missing, but also understand and communicate the skills that they already have.
Interesting. So they understand the gap. So Rob, do you have, would you like to comment on that?
I think I can expand on that a little bit. Just the hard skills and the soft skills that the students need. To Esteban's point, is really hard for them to understand that because they haven't had that context of the work environment. If they're in a co-op program, yes, they have a little bit, but if they haven't been in a co-op program, that might be a whole other world for them. I think there's one other piece to this too, in that we're looking at hard skills and soft skills. When we tend to look at the data, we're looking at the long term, like what's happening to them over, a 10-year period, and understanding the skills that they need as they evolve in their career from a junior to an intermediate to a senior leader. And those skills are also very different, but we don't always get to see what those skills are and those skills gaps are. But the one thing we can say is at least, an X% are getting to a management role within this time period, which can then inform a program of study, because maybe, the first 3 years in a career, they're all of a sudden managers. And so we need to move more management courses into a program of study or soft skills or something.
Thanks, Rob. So how do you use the data gathered about the alumni journey of past students to affect the outcome for future students? So you've touched on that, Rob, exactly. But how, and this is a question for both of you, and then how can you help companies track employee progression? Or can you? I mean, would you like to comment on that, either of you?
Yeah, I think so. On the first point, for sure. So everything I've kind of said about understanding their career and how fast they're getting to certain milestones is going to be helpful for future students, especially things like they're changing roles every 1.5 years, right? Like that's something to know. And I know with an original article I'd posted on UW Tech graduates, a lot of parents and students who were just coming into UW were reaching out to say, thank you for this, because it gives us insight into what program our student, like our son or daughter, should be selecting based on some of these metrics. So I think we're just starting to, have the tip of the iceberg on how we can make an impact and help people understand their careers as students, to understand the choices that they're making, the skills that they need through this data. But we're just really in the beginning stages.
Thanks, Rob. Esteban?
Yeah, from our side, I guess, is a little different perspective. We want to give students the most complete picture of how they can prepare for the jobs that they're passionate about, right? And I think that career progression data is just beautiful. So for let me give you an example. So imagine that there's a student, first year looking to become a machine learning engineer. So it's very unlikely for this student to secure a machine learning internship in their first co-op term or something, because there's just so much they need to learn from this profession before they can get there. And by the way, the same happens with maybe a product owner or project manager. But let's stick to the machine learning engineer example. So we could probably just tell them, hey, these are the skills that you need to become a machine learning engineer. But even if they try to get those skills, it's going to be really hard for them to do it. But imagine if I could tell students hey, there's a series of steps that you can follow to become a machine learning engineer. So here are roles that you could fit now that could help you develop transferable skills that could later be used as a machine learning engineer. So for example, you can start as a data tagger, which we're currently hiring for, by the way, and learn the basics for of machine learning. Then you take a couple courses and go into a software engineering role using Python, for example. Then learn a couple of skills and secure a data science role. And maybe by the time that you graduate, you can really secure a junior machine learning position. So I think the career progression data could be incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. If you look at career progression of those who are now in machine learning, you can actually say, well, 20% of these people actually started in these kind of roles and progressed to these kind of roles, and it took them X years to get there. And that data is very, very helpful to a student to try and understand what their journey looks like.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Really interesting. So playing devil's advocate for a moment, is it possible that, aligning future and existing employees to employer needs as well might become problematic? So, companies often hire for needs of the moment, but not necessarily thinking with a longer term view. So I guess future proofing needs to be part of the equation as well. And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I can take that one first. So first of all, I think there's a great question. I think there's a couple of things worth mentioning. Well, probably three things. So first of all, probably take a look at the Future Ready Talent Framework that was developed by the Department of Comparative Education here at the University of Waterloo. It's just wonderful. But I guess addressing the question a little more, I think that's why we're partnering with colleges and universities and not just trying to replace them. I believe that there's definitely needs to be a balance, and that we need to coexist because there's value that post-secondary institutions provide that we may never be able to provide. And I also think the other way around. But in terms of what we do, I think it's worth noting that the world has changed and that we can no longer expect, that a 4-year degree is going to prepare you for the rest of your life. That's not going to be the case if you align it or if you're not aligned it, kind of thing. And that's while students are in university and colleges, of course, they need to learn how to be adaptable. And the best way to do it is to understand what's really going on around them and learn. I think that we're preparing students to understand that the world is changing and helping them create the habit of lifelong learning. And I think it's worth giving a huge shout out to your team at GEDI and Wattspeed for the amazing work that you're doing in the field and how you're addressing lifelong learning.
Thanks. Well, that's great to hear. Thank you. I'll pass that back to the team if they're not on the line. Rob.
Yeah, I think the same things that Esteban is saying here. I think Waterloo is actually doing a really good job on starting programming to help prepare and people change their skills or enhance their skills. And I think education, its job is always been foundational setting and then learning how to learn, right? That's always been what education has been about. And so I think now more than ever, you have this foundation set and you have all these other building blocks that you can add and that you need to continue to add in your career. It's no longer, I do my 4-year degree, I'm now done with education. I never have to learn anything again. It's now, I've set a foundation in a particular area. I might cross mix that with something else. I might be a biology grad, but I might get into data science because those things have a lot of complements to each other. But if you go back, the main purpose is to set that foundation and teach them how to learn. And now it's about giving them opportunities to learn those other things as well without having to go into another 4-year degree of some sort.
So true. So true. So a request for each of you, could you perhaps provide an example of a project that you worked on and what transformation it's allowing your client to undertake? Esteban, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So one of the examples that I love, because I think a lot of institutions can learn from this, is that Purdue University created this program called the Milestones Program, where basically they created a skill-based micro certificates for students to acquire skills that won't be taught as part of their curricula, but that they know that industry really needs this. So for example, they're teaching stuff like programming with Arduino to like prototype electromechanical systems, or even just programming with Android, which is like pretty high in demand, of course. And they said that even though these courses are not for credit, they have these courses packed with students, and the students just asking for more, because they know that students love to learn stuff that will get them jobs, right? That will really make them employable. And one thing that they want to learn from the analysis and the data that we're providing them is what other courses, what other skills-based certifications can they create to supplement the knowledge gained by traditional classroom education, right? And really prepare students for this professional career. So I think that really touches a lot of what Rob was mentioning in the previous question of really trying to add these building blocks into a foundation that's really well established and accomplishing a lot of very important things.
Yeah, thanks, Esteban. Rob.
So when I think of a project, right now we're in the midst of this project with University of Waterloo Co-op and Judine Preddy. And even when we took initially we took a very, very small sample group, and we just looked at the data for that small sample group. And as we mapped it out, it just made us ask so many questions, and so many interesting things came out of that data. There were gender differences that were popping out. And I'm not going to state what those gender differences were, but because it was such a small sample size. So now we're doing a much bigger sample size on that group. But it really helped Judine and helped us really realize the impact of this career trajectory data and the questions that it can answer and the programs that it can influence based on the outcomes of that.
Interesting. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't want to cut you off.
No,
there.
that was it.
Super interesting. So just a wrap up question for both of you, wrap up of this panel portion. So why or how did partnering with the University of Waterloo make a difference? And obviously there's very close connection in both cases, but maybe Esteban, why don't you start with that?
Sure. Yeah. So Waterloo has played a huge role in everything that we have accomplished as a startup, starting with my education. So I'm a proud math alum from the University of Waterloo, also currently finishing my part-time Master's of Business Entrepreneurship and Technology. But then on top of that, like really, like our first investment came from the University of Waterloo's entrepreneurship ecosystem, which is the Velocity Incubator. We're also extremely lucky to have the ability really to like leverage guidance from the world leading institution in comparative education, and even now with GEDI, like we're being able even to access supercomputers, that will be covering a significant cost of our research and development. So honestly, we'll be forever grateful for all the support that we have received from the University of Waterloo.
Thank you. Yeah, that's fantastic to hear. And Rob?
Yeah, so for us, I think, a lot of what Esteban is saying for startups in the region, the University of Waterloo plays such a critical role. I think the other piece for us is working with the University of Waterloo, whether it be program staff or whether it be profs, everybody is curious and everybody wants to learn, and that breaks down barriers, and that actually creates lots of opportunities, because when you go and have these conversations and you start discovering something in data, everybody gets excited. And so working with the University of Waterloo has been such a pleasure from that perspective, because everybody is curious and they want to understand and they want to serve the customer so well. They want to serve the customer being the students, and they know if they serve that customer well, that the employers will benefit as well.
Very true. Thanks so much. So that's actually a wrap for the panel portion. And I just want to thank you so much, Rob and Esteban, for your thoughts and discussion. And, hopefully the audience found this discussion about empowering the students and educators of today to create the relevant workforce of tomorrow. Hopefully they found it as interesting as I did. It was really such an important conversation. So we're now at the 30-minute mark, actually just a minute over. So I'm hoping the audience can stay for an optional 10 minutes of Q&A. But for any of those who need to drop off, I just want to say thank you for very much for joining us. And if you want to exchange any thoughts with Profound Impact or 1Mentor, please let me know. Your contact info won't be shared outside the university, and we'll make just a warm introduction as requested. But please feel free to reach out to me, Bridget Maloney. My email address will be shown on the screen, or it's also on the GEDI homepage. So our next webinar next month is back to its usual Tuesday time slot, and it's on March 22nd. The title is being finalized, but our guests are going to be two GEDI exchange companies, High Ivy and Cosm Medical. And we'll be talking about something that doesn't often get discussed: women's pelvic floor health. It's unfortunate, since statistics have long shown us that approximately 1/3 of women in their lifetime suffer from pelvic floor health issues. And that's a massive amount of women. But there are technology advances that these two companies are making and that are helping to address this health issue for women. And we thought this is a very appropriate topic to discuss in March, given that International Women's Day is on March 8th. So a link to register for that webinar will be shared to our mailing list and on GEDI's social channels coming up in the near future. But I invite you to, follow GEDI on LinkedIn and Twitter, or sign up for our monthly newsletter, and you'll be informed of all the news and events. So hoping some folks can, the majority of the audience can stay on for a few more minutes, and we'll start the Q&A. So I'm happy to start that. And some questions have been submitted from the audience using the registration system during this webinar, and a couple came in beforehand during the registration. So I've been provided with a selection of questions, and Rob and Esteban, you're both welcome to contribute to the discussion of the questions. We'll probably try and keep the answers somewhat short, given we have 7 minutes left. But here's the first question. So it's a write-in question from the registration system, and it goes to you, Esteban. I'm actually going to add a little bit to it, since it's a good one and it's applicable to the university. So the person who wrote in the question asks, it's kind of a long question, but I'll read it out. Educational institutions struggle with staying current and relevant, but companies sometimes struggle with articulating what their needs are. So then how can educational institutions create programs that are meeting the exact needs of the real-time workforce? And to that, I'm going to add, we also sometimes see companies that needing to work on thinking about their longer-term needs so that they continue to stay current and competitive. And in that case, how can we adapt maybe a traditional approach to academic programs to address these emerging trends and these skill requirements at major corporations of any size, so that these companies are meeting the needs of the real-time workforce? So long question, but Esteban, why don't you let me know your thoughts on that?
Sure, I think we alluded to it while we're answering some questions about and I mentioned the skills articulation problem. I think I focused a little more when you asked that question on the student side of things. How can they articulate the skills that they're missing, but or that they have and that they're not putting it in the resumes and stuff. But on the other hand, there's also the companies, right? And I think that's really a problem when you rely on the current systems or of trying to understand what industry needs, which is basically, let's go and interview this company, and you go and interview one person from that company, and then you go into another company, and you got 50 samples of data saying like, okay, this is what they said, right? Like there could be a lot of bias there, really hard articulating that. What we're hoping to do is, of course, trying to increase that sample data set to try to reduce that problem as much as possible. And that's why instead of relying on 50 conversations, now we're relying in, as I mentioned, over 100 million job postings that we're looking at. So hopefully we're capturing much better information. That's what currently is being done right now. And to be fully honest with you, Bridget, I think I forgot the second part of the question. So, but I think it addresses more company side of things. So maybe Rob might be a better fit to answer that side of things.
Sure. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Esteban. Rob.
I think even job postings are a little bit late in the cycle of understanding what company needs are, right? Like they're reacting. And I think it's this first part of this question is just really hard because the market is shifting so fast that companies, remember the companies used to have a 10-year strategy, right? And now they have a 3-year strategy, and that's for a reason. Is because markets are shifting and things are changing all the time. So it's really hard for them. But I think if we apply, and Esteban is kind of alluding to this, if we apply what Google has learned in the way Google applies things. So I'll try and be really quick with this, but when Google looked at what people ate in their cafeterias, their teams, they learned that if they offered a smaller plate, that less food is consumed, then expecting maybe people would go back for seconds, but a smaller plate actually caused people to consume less food overall. And I think that's what we're saying here is, now we're starting to analyze this data of job postings. We're starting to analyze this data of career trajectory, and we're going to surface more insights based on that. But this isn't the panacea. We don't know, what solves exactly this. This is going to solve this, we're going to need a group of people, educators, companies, and data people to figure out what the right thing to do is.
Well, thanks. And you commented on the rate and pace of the market shifting. And I do want to mention a new unit at the university. So, we also at the University of Waterloo recognize this rate and pace of change of technology and these massive shifts in society, and, really acknowledging that learning does not and cannot end with the completion of a traditional degree like we talked about earlier. So that's why the university recently launched WattSpeed for those on the webinar who aren't familiar with it. WattSpeed provides professional education for industry professionals to keep pace with these emerging technologies, but also to understand how does it impact my business or my industry or the economy or the environment or society. And what's really cool is it's faculty members at the university that create and teach these courses. So the training has a really superb basis. So WattSpeed recognizes that this learning journey continues, and it has to be accessible in a way that professionals can consume it. So they're busy work lives, busy families, maybe it's childcare, elder care. There's lots of demands on our time. So how to deliver it in a way that people can actually learn and upskill and train, and it works with their life. So I think it's really great actually that the university launched WattSpeed, and it's at the forefront of this, as we're all talking about, this new approach to continued lifelong learning that's really, it's the leaders of today and the leaders of tomorrow that we've alluded to, right? That need to absorb this and learn these skills that are just ever changing, right? And the environment, the market, the jobs are ever changing. So just one last question. It's actually just a clarification, maybe Esteban, I think it was you, Esteban, mentioned a program at Purdue University. Could you repeat the name of it just so we have it on, this recording is going to YouTube, so it'd be great for.
Yeah, it's called the Milestones Program. And I can throw up the link on the chat if that's helpful as well, so people can look it up.
Oh, sure, that would be great.
Sure.
There's more questions. Unfortunately, though, we're out of time. I wish I could go on. So I'll just take this opportunity to really thank you, Rob and Esteban, so much, and congratulations on all the successes your companies have had so far and the milestones you've achieved. It's a really important niche in the niche in the market that your companies are serving, and it's very needed. So also want to thank, and I'll mention your company's name. So Rob Darling of Profound Impact and Esteban Ventimiglia from 1Mentor. So I want to get that, ensure that's on the recording. Really, you have terrific insights and experience, and I wish you much continued success for sure. So if anyone in the audience wants to exchange any thoughts, as I mentioned earlier, with either of these companies, just let me know and I'll make a warm introduction. Or if you heard something that intrigued you today about the companies or about the university or GEDI or the GEDI Exchange, please reach out to me. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, our next webinar is back to its usual Tuesday time slot on March 22nd. And as I said, the title is being finalized, but our guests are two GEDI Exchange companies, High Ivy and Cosm Medical, who both work in the area of women's pelvic health and are developing technology to help address this health issue for women. And it's very fitting given March holds International Women's Day on March 8th. So we'll send that link to register for that webinar next month if you follow us on our socials or on our GEDI newsletter. And just thank you once again to the audience and to Rob and Esteban. Really great to have you. It was a really great discussion. I enjoyed it. So look forward to seeing everyone in a month, and that ends our session for today. Thanks.